Animal Crossing New Horizons release came at the perfect time for me. I don't know what the current state of the world is since I'm writing the script in the past, but right now, this charming life simulator is what keeps me comfort during this period of my life being not so great. I've been a fan since my first experience with Wild World, and haven't missed a main entry from then on. Of course, I get my big fat dose of that familiar comfort, and have not been disappointed thus far with the game. But I always found myself thinking about life simulators as a genre and how we define them. We need to take a lot of factors into consideration. Many games may not be viewed as life sims as a whole, but actually do feature aspects that reflect a daily life experience. And sometimes games entirely focus on that one aspect. It would be impossible for me to cover all simulator type experiences in this video, so I picked those that are very personal to me. And given the importance of life sims in my own life, it only makes sense that it is. So initially it's easy to think that life simulators have to be experiences that are normal in daily life, but this isn't really the case. Take The Sims for example, where you play God for virtual people over endless generations should you choose to. The Sims themselves have needs just like a real human, which you as the player cater to unless you always kill them off for fun. You send your Sims to work, make sure they do their homework, decide whether they get married or even have a child. All of these experiences are very familiar for the average human being. But then you have the Grim Reaper, vampires, aliens, and just ridiculous situations in general. It's not 100% realistic, and it's what makes it a part of the extraordinary ordinary. However, game worlds and experiences that are too far removed and restrictive don't feel like life sims. For example, the Uncharted series isn't regarded as a Nathan Drake life simulator. There is the argument that the circumstances and linearity of it are so extreme that it's very difficult for the average person to relate to it. I'll get into this later, as this isn't always the case, but I think it's more that life sims require a larger degree of freedom which allows the player to project themselves onto the character they're playing. You tend to create both your story and your character, and the choices you make have a big effect on the virtual life of said character. Nathan Drake's story has already been told before you even started playing as him, and there's not really anything you can do to change his life events from the start of the game to the end. It's games like The Sims, Animal Crossing, and Stardew Valley on the other hand, that almost force you to make your own story. Despite the inclusion of certain events that all players will experience, the majority of it will be unique to you. Then you have games like Persona, which feature high school lessons and social events. Despite the fact that fighting shadows in a train station is a pretty unrealistic situation to be in, you have these parts of daily life which are so normal for a lot of people. You can invest yourself into relationships with the characters you choose depending on how much of your limited free time you want to spend with them. Or maybe instead you want to study more so you can be at the top of the class. Although there is some linearity and finality to the game, it gives you enough freedom to feel like your choices make a difference to your gameplay and story. I think Persona games in particular have a very good balance between life sim and other more combat-focused genres, and you'll find that a lot of games that we play have life sim aspects to a certain point. Yakuza is also a fantastic example. You get to experience these amazing Japanese environments, which holds a special place in my heart as I was lucky enough to visit Japan earlier this year. I get to relive the streets, the shops, and the culture all over again, albeit in a virtual altered form and about 30 years earlier, but I still feel the essence of it. It can also provide a sense of virtual tourism in that way, giving you an idea of real places, while still having the craziness that are Yakuza sub-stories. The ridiculous karaoke sequences are incredible, and the popularity of karaoke in Japanese culture gives more meaning to its inclusion. Some things in Yakuza are seriously faithful to reality, like the crammed shelves of Don Quixote, along with the jingle playing in store. Breath of the Wild is great at presenting a convincing daily life within its villages. Children are playing and chickens are being chickens. Blades of grass drift past you and people advertise their wares. And when the day turns to night, the inhabitants will quickly rush home so they don't make grandma angry. The music accompanying these places is calming and laid back, and the passing of time actually matters. Everything just feels right. You even get the chance to build your own home by doing a side quest, and although you can only really add in decorations, display some of your weapons, and sleep in there, just having a little place that's your own helps solidify a kind of normality to Link's life, despite the very abnormal circumstances. Even the cooking aspects of the game are sweet little moments of contemplation and preparation for the adventure ahead, as you make the food of your choosing by mixing certain ingredients together. In terms of the main story and gameplay, Breath of the Wild isn't a life sim, but in exploring the side quests and environment, it can sometimes really feel like one. In terms of life sim aspects in games that aren't strictly and exclusively associated with the genre, the main activities are things like cooking, fishing, and dating. And if you think of it, most JRPGs have at least one of those. There's definitely a spectrum when it comes to how much of a game can be viewed as a life sim, and it comes down to personal opinion too. But I think it's what makes these games all the more interesting to talk about, because you're not only talking about the game's experiences, but your own relationship to them too. Life simulators don't always have to be about the lives of humans, however, and my absolute favourite genre when I was younger was pet simulators. I'd put a lot of hours into Cats and Dogs 4, not just because I love to feel a sense of responsibility for a cute virtual creature, but because I was allergic to these animals in real life. Even so, I would stroke a cat I saw on the street or at a friend's house, despite the rashes and discomfort it caused me. Luckily, I grew out of my allergy to cats and dogs, but it was during that time in my childhood that I desperately wanted a furry friend, and having the Pets franchise and Nintendogs made me feel a little less weird and a little less lonely. It was an aspect of life that I didn't have the ability to experience without turning into a red rashy blob of a human being. So these pet sims gave me a chance at exactly that, minus the rash. It's not as fulfilling as having a real animal to look after, which I now know after finally having the pleasure of owning my cat Mochi. But I was and still am so thankful and enamoured by the idea of pet simulators, which in turn made me realise just how important life simulators are to me. Not just as a way to experience things I couldn't easily do in real life, but also as a way to relive certain experiences. I love animals. I always have, and I always will. And because of that, I bought into farming simulators pretty easily when I first found out about Harvest Moon on the Game Boy Advance. While there are people who very much enjoy the more realistic farming sims both graphically and in terms of gameplay, I personally enjoy the simpler ones like Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon. I prefer these types of games to be on the easier side while still remaining engaging with that hint of unrealism. Besides, that's not to say they don't involve their own challenges, but you still feel accomplished doing the normal day-to-day tasks, and there is a much greater freedom in terms of your pacing. You have the standard fruit and veg farming, tending to the animals, and social aspects, not to mention time management, as there is only so much you can do in a day and in a season. I even played this one farming game as a kid called Alex Builds His Farm, which I replayed just for this video. It's obviously very basic, but the variety of activities makes this life on a farm feel real. It gives you the adorable goal of getting your grandma the ingredients for dinner by completing all of the mini-games, and thus finishing the game. Now, my nostalgia definitely blinds me to the fact that the game isn't very good, especially by modern day standards. Yet I can't help but feel joy watching the character pick apples or giving some mice a bit of cheese. It's these seemingly pointless interactions from a gameplay perspective which add so much to the lived-in nature of the game. The little moments make a huge difference. Of course, we do get very specific simulator experiences like cooking, fishing, bus driving, you name it. Even such simple premises that one may experience in daily life becomes a completely different experience in-game, often a comical one. Take the social sim Facade, for example, a game where players would mess around with the consequences of saying something extremely rude to the AI hosts. You have these simulators of hobbies and typical activities people do in their free time, but then you have sims of actual jobs and careers, and why the hell would anyone want to play out a mundane day job? Well, it's because in video games you can actually choose to. You don't have to go to work to pay your real life bills and buy food. It's just a game. It will be there for you regardless of whether or not you choose to play it. You're in total control. The mundane is often therapeutic, and carrying out tasks along with that feeling of completion is more than satisfactory. There's no pressure to have to do well in order to survive in the real world. What's more is that you feel rewarded, like your actions actually make a difference. You're given reachable goals and with practice, hit even more objectives. Unfortunately, not everyone is able to have these things in their real working lives. These job sims can also offer a release from your current day job, and delving into a completely different line of work, even virtually, can still be stimulating. Plus, it's without the commitment. You could argue that because specific simulators are too limited in the kinds of things that you can explore, they can't be considered a life sim. However, I do think they come under the umbrella of life sims. In any case, we spend a lot of our lives working, so why wouldn't a job sim have any relevance to the life simulator genre? I mentioned how Yakuza can in a way be treated as a means of virtual tourism, for those not from Tokyo or Osaka of course. But saying that, different time periods can still be visited. How about if a game was made specifically to visit a certain time period and place? Not just geographically, but also in terms of nostalgia, whether or not you actually experienced it yourself. Boku no Natsuyasumi is a series that sadly is only available in Japanese. Yet despite my lack of lingual skills, I desperately wanted to play this game, even just to experience the beautifully hand-painted backgrounds. The game basically follows a young boy who goes on different holidays in each of the games. One may take you to Hokkaido in northern Japan, or another may take you to a coastal town in the south. These games surprised me with how well they present the feeling of a childhood summer holiday. Although I never personally experienced a childhood vacation in Japan, I drew the similarities between my own trips to Serbia, where I would spend my time exploring and catching bugs. I would have reflective moments in nature just doing nothing, or make up stuff to do. I was never bored. Then the evenings would wrap up the day with a family dinner, and the day starts again the next morning. In Boku no Natsuyasumi, time passes regardless of what activities you choose to do, which I was thankful for as someone who doesn't understand Japanese, but also in the sense that the flow of time doesn't stop for you. You're taken along for the ride, and while you get to choose what to do while on it, you don't dictate when it ends. In an issue with Scroll magazine, Boku no Natsuyasumi is dubbed as digitized nostalgia, which is probably the most perfect description of the game I've come across. The issue also has an interview with the creator of the series, Kazayabe, in which he says why he made these games. I was thinking that I wanted to create a game that simulates the real world, so I was trying to find a good subject for that. Back then, I was super busy with work, and when I was always clogged with work, I would remember this hill that was at my relative's house that I visited during my childhood summer vacations. So I kept coming back to that scene and wondering why I kept thinking about it. And then I thought, okay, maybe I could make a game that replicates your summer vacation. During development, the team heavily focused on the locations, faithfully recreating the atmosphere and environment from the visuals to the sound design. If video games had a scenic route, it would be the Boku no Natsuyasumi franchise. Other developers have also mastered digitized nostalgia, for example Inasa Fujio, who has 2 games in the works currently, one being Rainy Season, a slice of life game where you and your family have to cancel a trip to the amusement park due to the weather. So you stay indoors, talk with your family, and hang around the house. It's simple and relatable, and the cozy feeling of staying inside on a rainy day is one of my favourite things. The Inaka project, which is the second game Fujio is working on, has similar inspirations as Boku no Natsuyasumi, which in fact also happens to be one of them. Fujio explains that a summer spent at his grandmother's house in Osaka is what influenced him to make the game, just like Kazayabe and his summer vacations. The residential districts that you explore while working as a postman in the Inaka project are incredibly charming, and I have no doubt that it will be wonderfully relaxing to play. I do strongly believe that these games are fantastic life sims, and it's because of them I don't think that life sims need to strictly be never-ending, like Animal Crossing, The Sims, and Stardew Valley. So what is it that makes a good life simulator? It goes without saying that what makes anything good is extremely subjective, but based on the general positive reception to certain games, I think we can agree on most things. The little moments and details are what can really bring a game's atmosphere to life. Like the way the wind changes in New Horizons, some days gently brushing against a clothesline and other days spinning the wind turbines, or the family meals in Boku no Natsuyasumi to the calm sunsets accompanied by chirping cicadas. These moments are so picturesque, yet they're not especially fantastical, and that's exactly what makes it so ordinarily beautiful. Direct controls of characters can make you connect with them more, rather than in Sims where you control many people, and those Sims have their own agency, like waving to you if they need something. I'm not saying that The Sims is a bad life sim, it's quite the opposite, but it is very distinct in its way of treating the player as a god. You're still very much able to self-project onto your characters, but I think there's something more personal when you control every action and movement from the character's perspective, rather than as an overseer. A lot of the successful life sims include many customization options, again feeding into the idea of self-projection. It doesn't have to be the self you adopt in real life, it can also be the self you wish to be. That feeling of freedom within a life sim is incredibly important, as it needs to feel like you have control over the character and thus have a deeper connection to them. While I don't believe multiplayer is necessary, especially when well-made social simulator sections are in place, it can add another layer to the experience. You're able to share your virtual life with that of another, and in the current state of the world, this is definitely a beneficial aspect. It's a social aspect of the game which technically isn't simulated since you're playing with real people, it's just in a virtual world. The passing of time is also an important feature. The game doesn't need to be endless, and can instead inhabit a particular time window, as long as it can convey a relatable experience or is carefully constructed to relay the feeling of it, the game is successfully pulling the player into a simulated life. Having an ending doesn't mean the end, it just means you're closing a chapter, the rest is left to your imagination. Even in endless games, time needs to pass in an entertaining way. Games like Stardew Valley do this by using the changing of seasons. Or in the case of Animal Crossing, it also utilises hourly music in order to portray the flow of time. Modifying the weather, plants, and creatures available gives the player something to look forward to, regardless if their favourite month is now over. Just like life, some changes aren't always in your control, but you can still find the beauty in them. I do find that a fantastical touch to games makes them more immersive, although player choice must still be the overriding component. You quickly forget that all your neighbours are animals, and the Grim Reaper coming for your dying Sims becomes a normal occurrence. It's just enough extraordinariness to be fun, but not enough to break the immersion. Life simulators often offer you a perfect virtual life to indulge in. It doesn't have to necessarily be a realistic one, but as long as the player is enveloped in a believable world and life that they can affect, it's enough of a reality to provide satisfying escapism. Overall, the theory of self-determination can be used in the case of arguing what makes a good life sim. It consists of 3 factors: competence, relatedness, and autonomy. Competence being that of feeling like you have a level of mastery and an adequate skill set for the tasks at hand. Relatedness being the sense of belonging and connection with others, and autonomy is the feeling of control in your goals and your actions actually being meaningful. Life sims and games in general need to excel in all 3 areas in order to motivate the player. Games need to make you feel like it's possible for you to complete the quests given to you, even if that means a lot of practice. Although saying that, the accessibility factor of life sims comes from their easier difficulties for most features in the game. Plus, it's less so of having to be good at the game and more so how much time and effort you're willing to put in, giving you a great amount of freedom from the get-go. So that's competence ticked off the list. Then if we think of relatedness, we can look at the social aspect of life sims. It's how talking to the animals in Animal Crossing every day actually makes a difference. Not just by giving you rewards and little errands to run, but also by the fact that they will pick up on you not talking to them for a few days and ask you where you've been. The same as with dating sims, where your choices affect your relationship with potential partners. The AI of other characters in the game needs to be done in a way that makes you feel as though they're their own person, and through that, make you feel like your character can connect with them also. Finally, let's look at autonomy, the sense of control and importance. This is achieved mainly through customization and relationship progression with other characters which I've discussed, but it's also the form of progression in general that gives the player the most positive feedback. It's what keeps us playing all games, because if the game gave us no hope for success no matter what we do, you'd probably stop playing it. Life simulators don't tend to encourage violence or competitiveness. There's no winning, losing, killing, or dying, at least not in a way that's overwhelming and desensitized. It's there for however and whenever you want to play. The game serves as a tool for your creativity and a means of comfort, enveloping you in a virtual life. Life simulators can teach you an assortment of things, like how Persona makes you think about time management, or how Animal Crossing taught me what the hell a mortgage was. Sometimes the best things take a lot of hard work and time, and sometimes things don't go the way you plan them to. But there's always so much more that exceeds your expectations. So for the kid who loved playing Cats 4 while wishing for a real cat, the kid who dreamed of owning their own home from playing Animal Crossing, and the adult who wanted to relive their trip to Japan and the nostalgia of their childhood summer holidays, you'll always find solace under the umbrella of life simulators.